Yeah, great one. 2 Corinthians chapter 11. I'm going to get you guys to begin reading in verse 22, but before we get to that section, in verse 22, I'm going to read 16 through 21. We touched on a little bit on this last week. Let me just go ahead and read 16 through 21 of 2 Corinthians chapter 11. Paul said, I say again, let no one think me a fool. If otherwise, at least receive me as a fool, that I also may boast a little. What I speak not according to the Lord, but as it were foolishly, in this confidence of boasting. Seeing that many boast according to the flesh, I also will boast. For you put up with fools gladly, since you yourselves are wise. For if you put up with it, if one brings you into bondage, if one devours you, if one takes from you, if one exalts himself, if one strikes you on the face, to our shame, I say that we were too weak for that. But in whenever anyone is bold, I speak foolishly, I am bold also. I told you last week, guys, we're getting into this section where Paul's hand is being forced. What is Paul being forced to do that he doesn't want to do? If you guys will remember, Nancy.
To boast about those things that he went through for Christ.
Okay.
For the spreading of the gospel.
Right. Now, guys, why did Paul feel like he's being forced to brag on himself? Anybody know why?
Because others were trying to turn people against him and they were lying on him.
That's right. So they were turning against him. And not only that, you actually had other people that were boasting on themselves. And they were quick to believe that. And it's kind of sad that people are going to challenge you to do something you really shouldn't have to do in the first place. I'll do it, but I shouldn't have to do this. You know me. And of course, did you notice that that little bit of sarcasm in verse 19? For you put up with fools gladly, since you yourselves are wise. You see, this was the problem with the brethren at Corinth. I mean, they considered themselves so wise. And yet, unfortunately, and we see this time and time again, where he said in 20, you put up with it if one brings you into bondage, if one devours you, if one takes from you, if one exalts himself, if one strikes you on the face. You're putting up with that. Why are you putting up with that? I told you guys over and over again, the responsibility you have as members of the congregation. And of course, we're not all preachers. But when you're sitting and listening, whether you're going to a gospel meeting or the local man there, how many times have I told you guys that it may bother me when the preachers get away with stuff, but what bothers me more? That no one says anything. As much as it bothers me that the teacher gets away with it, who's allowing it to happen? Yeah, the congregation is allowing that to happen. So you guys, I'll include myself in that. We can get all upset and point the finger at these false teachers and blah, 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 and so-and-so's getting away with it and da-da-da. And you don't say anything. Well, you're the reason it's happening. You're the reason he's getting away with it, because you're not speaking up. And that's why he's talking about here. It's so sad when people allow these things to happen. Jane?
I may have missed something, but in reading these two letters, do you get the feeling that there's no leadership in Corinth?
Oh, Jane, I'm telling you, there's a point out you just said there that I'm going to be really harping on in one of my 5 points tonight in my sermon. Every once in a while you get a lesson, I say, pay attention to this. But we will spend a little time on that. You're absolutely right. Who's the leaders here right now? I mean, Paul's writing to the church. Who's the leaders right now? False teachers. Isn't that something to be proud of? You're being led by these false teachers, and they have convinced you that their thinking is right, and Paul is showing them with their inconsistency, you put up with that. You put up with foolishness because you're so wise. You know, he's just showing how ludicrous that is. It's ridiculous. So let me back up. I've already talked about a few verses in between, but what we read earlier, I say again, let no one think me a fool, if otherwise at least receive me as a fool, that I may boast a little. Don't treat me like this, but if you're going to treat me like this, let me act like this. Did you get that? Don't treat me like this, but if you're going to think I'm like that, then just tolerate me for a moment on this. That's all you know, I read this and I just see what Paul's saying. Give me a fair handshake. That's all I'm asking. Just listen. Hear me out. Hear me out. And that's what I do when I'm getting into a Bible study with people and they keep cutting me off and cutting me off. Wait a second. Can I just say something? Can you just hear me out? I'll let you speak. I think it works two ways. Don't cut people off. Let them talk. And I'll often do that. I'll just let them talk. Unfortunately, if I give them an inch, they take a mile and they talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And then I finally have to say, what was your point to all of this? It makes no sense. But yeah, it works both ways. So Paul is asking them, listen. He says in verse 17, what I speak not according to the Lord, but as it were foolishly, in this confidence of boasting. Remember, these false teachers were the ones who were arrogant, boastful, had that confidence, as if Paul, remember accusing Paul of being weak in speech and stature, whatever. And Paul is saying, look, I'm going to come across, I'll be just like them. Just listen to me. Hear what I have to say. In verse 18, seeing that many boast according to the flesh, I also will boast. It's kind of sad. I don't know what these false teachers were boasting about. But without you guys even knowing, because we don't know, compare what Paul could boast about and what they could boast about. What do you think that's going to be like? I mean, there's absolutely no, I have no idea. I mean, you guys are about to read in verse 22 at the end of the chapter, all that Paul had to endure. Nancy?
We don't get the idea that these teachers in Corinth had been anywhere at all, anyway.
That's why Paul's playing. I see he's got an ace up his sleeve. Paul's playing his ace. You're forcing my hand. I shouldn't have to do this. But you talk about being boastful. And he's going to talk about all these things. All of a sudden, how do these false teachers now appear in the eyes of the Corinthian brethren? That's his point. You're accusing me of weak and them being strong. When I'm finished with this, tables are going to be turned. If you're going to be honest. If you're going to be honest. It's like when you have the truth on your side. You've got nothing to be afraid of. It should turn the tables, but sometimes, folks, there are people who want to remain foolish. Remember what I said? You can't stop people from telling lies, and you can't stop people from believing lies. You can't. But you can do a good job of trying to stop that, and that's what Paul's doing here. I like the fact that he is so wise, of course, writing by inspiration. All right, let's move on. So he mentioned in verse 20 that I mentioned earlier, that if someone brings you into bondage and devours you, takes from you, and exalts himself and strikes you on the face, you put up with this. I've seen it. I have seen people abused terribly, and they shrug their shoulders and go, oh, well. Who does that? Come on, let's get to the heart of this. What members of the body of Christ will be abused and shrugs and goes, oh, well. Who does that? Come on, what kind of person is that? Because that's the person you don't want to become. What kind of person is that, Warren?
Well, I think it's someone who's really afraid to speak up.
There's one.
Lukewarm.
What's that?
Lukewarm.
Lukewarm?
Weak.
Weak? What else? Okay. The one that puts up with it is the idea is that one that is dominated by others, one who elevates other people, one who belittles themselves. I mean, anybody that would put up with that kind of thing and just shrug it off like, oh, well, look what they just did. Oh, well. And we walk away, tail between our legs, like we're defeated. That's the person that's not relying on the Lord. That's the person who's become almost like a man follower, believe it or not. Jane?
In today's world, you hear a lot, I don't want to be a troublemaker. But the thing is, if you get to the problem at the first and talk then you won't have to be a troublemaker. You won't be a troublemaker.
Right.
But if you don't do anything or say anything, to where the problem can be taken care of,
Sure.
then then you have that fellow, I'll split the congregation, and no one wants to do that.
Well, and I think, Gene, a person has to come to grips with the fact that it could happen. In other words, when he's writing this, is he writing this to the false teachers?
No.
No. And so, regardless, he's not changing their thinking. He's trying to change the congregation's thinking, right? Trying to get them. And so, when push comes to shove, there's going to be animosity between those false teachers and them if they take a stand. And that's the point. You have to have the kind of courage, and somebody mentioned that earlier about being weak. You have to have the kind of courage that says, not only could this not blow up, but accepting the fact that it could blow up. And I'm willing to face that. I'm willing to accept that. The lack of courage, I don't want to be a troublemaker. Well, one side of the coin, you mentioned, Gene, well, you might not be a troublemaker if we nip this and we move on. But if it's not nipped, in the sense where it gets bigger and bigger and it blows and there's a split, are splits always bad? Are splits always bad? Tell you, when there's a purging, if people want to do what's wrong, there's the door. That's what Jesus was talking. But was Jesus wanting, as last Sunday sermon, was Jesus wanting the 12 to leave when he said, do you also want to leave? Did he want them to leave? No, the point was, if you wanted to go, go. And that's what we say about standing for truth. It's not like we don't care. If we think for one moment when we're reading 2 Corinthians that Paul doesn't care about the salvation of these false teachers, we're wrong. But he understands that these false teachers are hurting other lives.
And you kind of understand if he can get the congregation to be a little more courageous, understanding, and knowing the truth, that they should be able to stand up against the false teachers.
And who knows? Maybe the false teachers come around. Who knows, right? We're not going to let you away with that. Oh, okay. Again, it's what it's expected out of them. Yeah, the idea of people bringing you into bondage and devours you and takes from you. People are taking from you. I've seen it. And I've seen religious leaders take advantage. Make demands. And this is the way it's going to be. Okay. Again, for the very reasons you guys already talked about. So here we are talking about something some 2,000 years later. Has man changed? Congregations haven't changed. So we better learn from them.
When you run into situations where a preacher refuses to preach a subject, then really he's saying, I'm in command here.
Yeah. I'm the boss. I'm the boss.
I'm not going to teach that subject.
No. Or even have expectations of him to preach. I'm going to I take 16 weeks off a year. What? Hey, if you want me preaching here, I'm going to take 16 weeks off a year. That's my terms. What do you say? Thanks. See you later. No, I think we'll get somebody else to come in here. I like that. And when he says all of that in verse 20, he says, to our shame, I say that we were too weak for that. We were too weak. We, as an apostle, let's get this. We were too weak that we didn't bring you into bondage, that we didn't devour you, that we didn't exalt ourselves and we didn't strike you on the face. We were too weak to do that. Man, I don't know what these brethren are thinking when they're reading this, but I'm thinking right about now, if somebody's standing up and reading this and I'm a member at Corinth, my face is red, I'm embarrassed, I'm ashamed of myself. Because those guys convinced me as a member at Corinth to look down on Paul because he was so weak, because he didn't do the things that they're doing to them. How sad is that? Oh, yeah. Paul, you weakling, you should have brought us into bondage. You should have exalted yourself. You should have struck us on the face. What? And, but in whatever anyone is bold, I speak foolishly. I am bold also. Okay, now let's get to the nuts and bolts of this chapter. Okay. 22, we started at the back last week. Let's go over here. Keith, let's start with you. You guys will come forward. 2 apiece. Start in verse 22. Let's finish the chapter.
Are they Hebrews? So am I. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they the seed of Abraham? So am I. Are they ministers of Christ? I speak as a fool. I am more. In labors more abundant, in stripes above measure, in prisons more frequently, in deaths often.
From the Jews 5 times I received 40 stripes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods, once I was stoned, 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I have been indeed.
In journeys, often in perils of waters, and perils of robbers, in perils by mine own countrymen, in perils by the heathen, in perils in the city, in perils in the wilderness, in perils in the sea, in perils among false brethren, in weariness, and pain, in watchings often, in hunger, and thirst, and fastings often, in cold and nakedness.
Because the other things that comes upon me daily, my deep concern for all the churches. Who is weak and I am not weak, who is made to stumble, and I do not burn with indignation.
I have to boast, I will boast of what pertains to my weakness, the God and Father of the Lord Jesus. He who is blessed forever knows that I am not lying. In Damascus, Ithamar, under Petrus, the king guarded the city of Damascus in order to seize me, that I will let down in a basket through a window in the wall, so as to escape his hand.
Poor Alan got all the big words. Sorry about that. You should have passed it over to Warren. Okay. Wow. Did Paul really want to say these things? I mean, come on, if we do stuff, shouldn't we brag on ourselves? Why shouldn't, I mean, even you guys, I mean, why? I mean, if there's things you guys are doing that nobody's aware of, shouldn't you tell people? Okay, all right. Why do people do it? You know, Paul's doing something he didn't want to do, but yet we know these false teachers were glad to brag on themselves. Who wants to do that? Those who want to elevate themselves? Well, who else? Those who want to create followers. You know, it's one thing to elevate yourself. It's another thing to have an influence on other people. Obviously, that's what these false teachers wanted. You know, you start bragging on yourself, and I tell you, teachers have to watch this. I was warned about this a long time ago as a young teacher. I do like, you know, once in a while it happens, especially if I'm talking about families. I mean, obviously, I can remember raising my own kids, so I would use illustrations within my own family. But you have to be careful as teachers that it's all about you. Let me tell you about all the wonderful things I've done as a gospel preacher. And it's all about me. And here's what I did. And I did this. And here's my Bible study habits. And here's what I do. And what are you doing? And here's my prayer habits. And it's all about me to elevate myself. It can happen. You got to watch that. We're learning here that Paul is talking about things he didn't want to, but they are forcing his hand on it because you had these false teachers. And I don't know what they're saying about themselves. I have no idea. I can't imagine what they're saying in comparison to what we're reading about here. And there's one of the things here that really, really jumps out at me. And I don't know if it jumped out about you. Of all the things that he had to face, there's something that really came to a head in this text that relates to this whole letter. Which one was it? Betty read it. Verse 28. All those terrible things, and he throws this into the same category as being stoned, being whipped, being hungry and thirsty, and left for dead. I mean, I can't imagine being left for dead. All these problems that he had, and then he says, besides the other things, what comes upon me daily, my deep concern for all the churches. And who would that include? Them. You're on my heart. Isn't that the same here? We constantly pray for the brethren here. We constantly pray for the church here, for our for the work and everything that we're doing, our spiritual well-being as a body of Christ. Constantly doing that. It's just never there. It's just, you know how that you guys, it's fortunate. I've asked some of you guys that have jobs, do you have to take your work home? I'll often say that. I'll just say, do you have to take your work home? It's almost like I envy that, And they'll go, no, I leave it there and I don't go back until Monday. You don't bring any work home? Nope. You're not worried about, no, it'll be there when I get there. You can just walk away from your job? That's kind of cool. Do you ever walk away from the church? You can never walk away from it. It's there 24/7, 365 days a year. You constantly, always, and I don't care who you are, but especially with elders, it doesn't matter if you're out of town. If I'm out of town, I wonder who's there this morning. I wonder how things went today. We're anxious to hear about the shot in the arm, the update in the morning, just see how things were. Because we're just mindful of our brothers and sisters and what's going on. And I love that. And so Paul throws that in there. And to me, that was the sermon. To me, that's the key to all of this. Because with these brethren, these false teachers rather, could you really say that they had a deep concern for the churches? These false teachers. What do you think their biggest concern was? Yeah, their biggest concern is making sure that these people understand that we are great and wonderful. That that we need to be treated as above them. That we're special. That's their concern. I don't see that in here on any of this list. Where Paul's talking about, you talk about suffering for Christ. I was with a congregation. They didn't even thank me for what I did. I don't see that there. Paul, now look what he talks about. Are they Hebrews? So am I. The Israelites? So am I. Are they the seed of Abraham? So am I. Let's not pass over those guys. Is that something worthy to brag on?
He's establishing credibility in the sense of they're saying they're special because of this. Do you forget I'm the exact same as, I've got all the same credentials that they do, right? And some.
Paul actually brought this up before. You guys recall when he talked about the fact that he was of the tribe of Benjamin, Hebrew of Hebrews, and other passages, but he counted all that for loss. Paul was saying, if anybody had confidence in the flesh, I more so. He said, but I don't have confidence in the flesh. It's all about Jesus Christ and Him crucified. And if people want to put confidence in the flesh, it's kind of like bragging on somebody. It's funny, I've been at places, where somebody, they're not living right. Well, my dad was an elder of the church for 40 years. What's your point? That doesn't prove anything. My dad was an evangelist. Okay, and reason you're bringing that up, that doesn't carry over. You've got to stand on your own 2 feet here. And Paul, that's why Paul doesn't want to talk about this kind of stuff. But they're going to brag on themselves. You're quick to follow them, and you have forgotten about me. That's the sad part. Have you ever had a conversation? I don't want to bring up any wounds, old spats. But have you ever said to somebody, maybe somebody next to you, saying, I can't even believe you thought that? Have you ever done that? Have you ever been in that situation where you told somebody they had a disagreement? I can't believe you even thought that I would say something like that. I can't believe that you thought that I even would do something like that. Why would you say that? What's the purpose of saying that? Come on, guys, why would you say that to somebody? I can't believe you would even think I would do something like that. Why would you say that? What kind of response do you want out of them?
Right. Well,
What kind of response?
I didn't think you would.
You want to make them feel bad, right? I don't know about you. Is it really that hard? I'm saying, if I told Debbie, I can't even believe you thought that I would do something like that. That hurts her. See, now I want her to feel bad, right? Isn't that the purpose of me saying that? I want her to feel bad. And Paul's at this situation where you didn't even give me the credit that was due me. And you could see, I don't know about you guys, I see Paul, it hurt Paul. It hurt Paul that they turned on him.
Earlier, he told him that he bragged about him. And he was there 3 years. You should have known something, about him. But here, I bragged about you. Now, look what you're doing. And the way what I get out of this is Paul had a lot of concern, and he's taking his last shot at Corinth. In other words, he didn't necessarily want to do all this boasting and whatnot, but this is the last time I'm going to be able to get this straightened out. So he gave him his last shot.
Because this wasn't chapter 1. This wasn't the first part of the letter. The first part of the letter, he's telling them, how all these good things, I pray for them, and we have this bond, and this brother repented. You did what I said in the first epistle. He's bragging on them a lot. That's what you do. It's not buttering up. He didn't butter them up. He told them the truth. Jesus did that with 5 of the 7 churches of Asia. You're doing this good. You're doing this good. You're doing this good. But I have this against you. And so Paul builds up a rapport with them. That's opinion area. That's kind of like when a preacher comes in that we have for a gospel meeting. That's why I kind of like that if he's got a hard lesson, kind of do it a little bit later in the week when the brethren get to know your personality, that you care for them, you love them. And then, but you come in, they don't even know you, and boom, you lower the boom, like, he's going to straighten us out like we have all these serious problems. It can create a problem. This is just opinion. But anyways, I just think that there is a need, and Paul teaches this by inspiration, to acknowledge the good that's there. And as preachers, learn that. Just don't harp. Build the brethren up, commend them, encourage them. Warn them, yes. Rebuke them, yes. But there needs to be balance. And Paul would do that with these brethren, as Gene pointed out. And so now he's coming down to this of talking about, well, look at verse 23. Are they ministers of Christ? I speak as a fool. I am more. I am more. Are they being Christ-like, by the way? Now, let's just tell it like it is. They're ministers of Christ. They told you they're ministers of Christ? And he already told them about bringing them into bondage, exalting themselves, devouring you. That's so contrary to what being a minister of Christ is. I am more, in labors more abundant, in stripes above measure, in prisons more frequently, in deaths often. I think it's humbling for all of us to read this. You guys have had a bad time. You had a rough time being a Christian. Read this. Read the life of Paul, what he had to put up with. From the Jews, 5 times I received 40 stripes minus 1. You want to pass over that one, do you? How would we feel if one of the brethren here, ISIS got a hold of them, he showed it to some of us guys, all those stripes on his back where he was whipped. For being a Christian, we mean, man, I'm proud of you for standing up there, right? Good for you. I mean, for years we've had visitors came in. You should hear what happened to that guy. Once, Paul, 5 times minus 1. I just can't imagine all that Paul went through. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. You ever been hit by a rock? And I don't think it was once. I don't think Paul was stoned like, ouch. I'm going to put that in my resume. I was stoned. It wasn't this one little rock. The guy was stoned. And what they do is usually a group of people, and they're all throwing rocks at you. And when he talks about this idea earlier, remember? And let me read on here. So 3 times I was shipwrecked, a night and a day I had been in the deep, and journeys often in perils of water, robbers, my own countrymen, the Gentiles, in the city, in the wilderness, in the sea. false brethren. Threw that one in there. That's what he's dealing with right now. This is not a surprise to me. Paul's been down this road before. And I don't think you get used to it. I don't think you just say that, well, that's life. It bothered him. This is what it means, folks, to be a servant of the Lord. Just putting the Lord first. These false teachers claiming to be servants of Christ, they're anything but. You guys are Christians? Great. Then let's live as one. That's all he's saying. Okay, just put them first. And there are things that come because of that. So in weariness and toil and sleeplessness often, going without sleep. Say, Paul, get in line. Any guys ever been a little bit insomnia? You ever just have those nights where you can't sleep? Is that what is that what we're talking about here? You know, Paul, there's just a few times he just, he ate too late and couldn't sleep. He went, what's this idea of sleeplessness?
Maybe having to get away from not being able to sleep, to go from one place to another.
Yeah.
Not being able to have that rest.
Think of the times when he's been in prison and the suffering that was going on. What did I hear? Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So, I mean, you just got to put it all together here. I mean, there's going to be times I'm just going to be starving. And when you're hungry, you sleep well? It's just all, I don't know. I just really, you get a clear picture here of the kind of life that Paul lived and being an apostle. And, with that hunger and that thirsting, the fasting often in cold. Well, let me not pass over fasting. We always think of fasting. Sometimes it can be used in the positive sense, right? I fasted. Was Paul complaining about fasting for the Lord? Giving myself to prayer and meditation? Well, fasting also means what? I mean, you're going without food. That's what he's talking about here in those situations. And times, because of the heaviness of his heart, that's why he was fasting, giving himself to prayer and supplications to God because of what maybe the circumstances were. Mentally, I'm seeing physical exhaustion. I see that mental, that physical. Then he also mentions what comes upon me daily, my deep concern for all the churches. And it wasn't just Corinth. Why do you think it was important to mention, or why do you think it's powerful to mention, and the churches? In light of writing this letter, why do you think that's a good thing to say? Any ideas? Dan?
That's a daily challenge for one thing. It's not a one-off event. Some of these others were, but then that also gives them good insight into his motivation. Why was he going through all those other things? Because we've talked about the idea before that a person can suffer for doing wrong. Paul's not the only person who has ever endured some of those challenges. Prisoners would, at that time were getting, whipped and beaten with rods and all that kind of stuff. He wasn't going through those things because, for the same reason that some other people might have.
Okay. And I do like that. And again, that's why Paul's not wanting to brag on himself. He's not the only one who suffered as a follower of Christ in the first century. Nancy?
But he wasn't doing it for himself. He was showing that, he was preaching, he was going out to all the churches, and he wanted them to know that. Right. No matter what's happening, he was always thinking about it.
And in line with that, it's also nice to know that Paul isn't just centering Corinth out. To me, that's coming crystal clear here. It's not just you; it's everybody. I'm not ganging up on you. It's not like I have a vendetta. I said, man, Paul's really got it in for us, brethren. I know. Why doesn't he talk about other churches like this? Well, he wrote other churches, right? And these letters were to be passed on.
It's interesting, in the first chapter, with all this happening to him, he's concerned, he said, he'd be a castaway. In other words, in the 27th verse says, but I keep under my body and bring subjection, lest by any means when I have preached to others, I'll be a castaway.
And using those terminologies about this whole idea of, I endured all those things. I want to stay faithful to the Lord. That's the goal. That's it. I mean, the bottom line of all this, when you know, if you have to go to a brother or sister that's in sin or whatever, the bottom line is we just want people to go to heaven. That's what we say. We just want people to go to heaven. Paul's writing this. I just want you to go to heaven. I want to go to heaven. I don't want to grow weary in well-doing. I want to encourage you guys to stay the course, which Gene was talking about there, which he gets to. And so when he talks about all those things, he gets back to the point in verse 29. So who is weak? And I am not weak. Who is made to stumble, and I do not burn with indignation? If I must boast, I will boast in the things which concern my infirmity. The God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who is blessed forever, knows that I am not lying. That's important. I think that's a key whenever we're talking with people. Is everybody you're going to study with going to obey? Any idea of the percentage? Pretty small. Because the Lord says few. And so it can get a little discouraging. But the bottom line is, when you do things, and even if you're falsely accused, by the way, the Lord knows. There's got to be comfort. We have to understand that we as God's people, God knows the truth. And as far as knowing things that you do that other people do not do, that do not know, God knows. That ought to bring some satisfaction to us. Warren, did you have that? Okay. And so you and I find comfort in serving our Lord. That's what it's all about. It's not the outward. I'm telling you, if it was the outward, Paul would have used this argument a long time ago, but he didn't. They forced his hand on it. That's the point. In Damascus, the governor under Aretas, the king, and the guardian of the city of Damascus with a garrison, here it is, desiring to arrest me, but I was let down in a basket through a window in the wall and escaped from his hands. Paul had people to help him. He had enemies. He understands that. And I like that he's bringing up to these Corinthian brethren. Folks, we need to understand this as a church here.